Okay, welcome to the fourth and the final edition of the Sterling One Foundation ESG webinar series. It is not the final in terms of finality, but it is the final for this year. And we intend to make it with you as our participants, let's make it a very interesting one, and the speakers and the entire Sterling One Foundation family. And today we'll be speaking. We have our speakers, our facilitators will be speaking to a very interesting conversation, They'll be speaking to the topic driving the growth of the circular economy in ESG. What does the circular economy even mean? What does it mean? So it's something that I know maybe a lot of people have read about the circular economy, and I'm sure a lot of you have been wondering what this actually means, or you have your own meaning of the circular economy. But in this session, you have a clear understanding with the experts that we have brought on board to speak to you. They will come from a very technical essence, from a very scholarship essence, and from an understanding that even a layman could also understand at the end of the day. But prior to that, I would suggest that we do some introductions, and those introductions will be done by you dropping your names and your organizations on the chat box. Please drop your names and organization on the chat box so that we'll know who you are and where you are from. Please, it's very, very important. You can start dropping your names and your organization on the chat box. But I look forward to you guys, with all of us having a great session. And I know very well that the speakers that we have on board will deliver a great session today. And by the time we leave this, at the end of this series, this particular webinar today, is going to be a holistic area awareness and a revolution and a rethinking of the circular economy as we know it. Because I know the facilitators, they are right on top in terms of this in this area. So please pay good attention as we welcome in our very first speaker. As we welcome in our very first speaker, the woman that has made this possible, the driver of the Sterling One Foundation, who has made this possible. Join me as I read the profile of Olapeju Ibekwe. We call her Peju. In terms of, she's a seasoned business leader, a filmmaker, and a sustainability professional. That is, you can imagine that, all in one. With keen interest in women empowerment, access to quality education, and better healthcare and youth development. She has 2 decades of corporate experience, over 2 decades of corporate experience, and she has built expertise in brand and marketing communications, strategy formulation and execution, team management, process improvement, strategic partnerships, and business expansion. Peju currently oversees all operations and initiatives of the Sterling One Foundation, a social change vehicle focused on tackling the root causes of poverty in Nigeria. Under this non-profit, she works with and supports various non-profits across the African continent in capacity building, alternative financing, and amplifying impact within the foundation's key focus areas, which are healthcare, climate action, youth development, education, gender equality, and women empowerment and food security. She also works with the private and public sectors on social impact initiatives and spearheads coalition building within different sectors through the African Social Impact Summit. The African Social Impact Summit is one of what I would call the most impactful social impact summit in the sustainability space in Africa. It's been on for quite a number of years, and every year that summit has been phenomenal across Africa in terms of the impact and scale that is connected to that summit. Peju sits on the board of the One Earth initiative, where she helps shape impactful policies and initiatives for medical practitioners and everyday Nigerians seeking better health care. As a movie producer, she uses her work within the media and creative space to raise awareness about gender issues, especially gender-based violence, while actively supporting young girls through mentorship, providing business advisory for very early stage entrepreneurs and supporting climate action initiatives in coastal communities. In December 2022, Peju received the Leadership Impact Award in non-profit management at the CSR Reporters Philanthropic Awards on social impact and sustainable practices. Please join me in welcoming Peju, the CEO of Sterling One Foundation, to give a welcome address and set the context for this important webinar series on the circular economy in Nigeria. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Godson, for such a humbling profile you have shared. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from anywhere you're joining us from across the world. Thank you so much for joining us for this final edition of the ESG webinar series for the year 2025. Of course, this webinar series is made possible by our partners, who include the Lagos-based Business School Sustainability Center, the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, Sterling Bank, NGX Group. We also have UNIDO Investment Technology Promotion Office. We have the PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you again, Godson. And of course, we have the Lagos Chamber of Commerce in the LCCI. Let me just call their acronym. And today we are also welcoming an international organization, B Labs, as one of our partners for the ESG webinar series. We are really glad that you have chosen to join us for this very important topic, which is on driving the growth of the circular economy in ESG. Before we go ahead, I would like to just tell you a bit for those who do not know about Sterling One Foundation. Sterling One Foundation is a vehicle for positive social impact across the African continent, and we prioritize partnerships at the core of the work we do. We were established by Sterling Bank, although we have a separate board of trustees. We seek to build and catalyze partnerships across the development ecosystem, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa. Interestingly, this ESG webinar series was birthed during one of the sessions at the Africa Social Impact Summit that Godson has spoken about, because we realized there was a major gap, not just in knowledge, but also in technical application of environmental, social, and governance principles within the private sector and the nonprofit ecosystem on the continent of Africa. And we are really glad for all our partners that have come to make this successful. And we're also glad for you that have joined us today to be a part of this session. We are going to be looking at this topic from the lenses of course, two awesome experts in this space, and these are Dr. Natalie and Mr. Fabian. Thank you also to our fantastic speakers that are in the room. Before we go ahead, I'm just going to give a short overview, as this is a welcome address. The circular economy, like we know, is an economy that seeks to reduce waste, seeks to promote efficiency, seeks to ensure that our environment is sustainable. What I really love about the circular economy is that it helps to promote better profitability, because you are reducing your costs. For those that are just joining us for the first time, we know that the ESG principles are designed to promote long-term financial success for every corporate within Africa. And the circular economy, like they say, we talk about the 3 R's, which are reduce, reuse, and recycle for sustainability. I'm glad to have worked in an organization that leveraged this principle. And if I remember, it was a pilot program that they did then on the reduction in the use of paper and leveraging digital platforms for more communication, both internal and external communication. It was amazing because the cost line dropped significantly. And that is reducing the use of paper. And that's a component. So some of the things that we're going to be sharing today, these are things that I would say that we have tested in experientially. And I would also say that they are trusted principles. Um, I would not want to assume that everyone in this room understands ESG, as we may have some people that are joining us for the first time. And ESG basically stands for environmental, social, and governance principles that represent key factors that drive sustainable practices in businesses within Nigeria, and actually is a global phenomenon, and different across different climes in the country, in the world. Deadlines have approached and are approaching. In Nigeria, by 2030, every business, and this includes public sector, private sector, and small businesses, need to be reporting in alignment with ESG principles. So this conversation is not just about moral suasion, it is a compliance issue. So it is something that every organization really needs to pay attention to. Of course, there are several benefits, and if you've been part of this session in the past, for those that have not been part of this ESG session in the past, I would encourage you to please check out our YouTube page, and you will see the recordings of past ESG sessions. The impact on business is excellent. I had mentioned cost reduction. The other impact, of course, is increase in profitability. It is also excellent for retaining top talent and attracting top talent in your business. It is also excellent for attracting impact investment for investors that are interested in organizations that have managed their ESG indicators for risk management, as a risk management investment, because it also guarantees sustainability. I don't want to go into all of that. You can get more on our YouTube page. Now we're talking about the circular economy versus the linear economy. The circular model prioritizes reducing waste, reusing materials. I've given an example of paper, recycling, and yes, recycling of plastic, and taking this plastic back into the economy and into the value chains, promoting increase in job creation. And these things are everywhere in our country right now. The linear model, on the other hand, follows a straightforward path: takes resources, uses them, and then disposes of the waste without taking into cognizance the possibility of reusing or recycling these resources. Of course, what we have discovered is that these resources, some of them, especially plastic that is not biodegradable, cause environmental harm. And today we're talking about how you can drive your ESG principles and infuse these principles in your various businesses. And because the circular economy matters. Why does it matter? It reduces your carbon footprint, reduces your environmental impact. It enhances your social value, not just with your external stakeholders, but also your internal stakeholders, not just within the community that you operate, but also for your human resources, for your investors. The value is multidimensional, and of course, excellent for governance. The key pillars of a circular economy include designing out wastes and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, regenerating natural systems, collaborating across various value chains to enhance value for the various stakeholders, measuring and reporting impact for transparency and accountability for all your stakeholders. There are various real world examples, but for the sake of our time, I trust that our facilitators will go deeper into sharing some of these use cases to help us fully appreciate how we can drive this circular economy in our various organizations and in our various businesses to enhance value for us, not just in the short term, but also in the long run. We already have some policies by the Federal Ministry of Environment for this principle. And there are different stakeholders. Of course, the government has enabling policies to promote the circular economy. We have the private sector, which so many private sector organizations are represented in this room, will help to innovate and invest in sustainable business models. The civil society organization are doing fantastic work in driving awareness, behavioral changes, and of course, we have the financial institutions who finance and invest across catalytic capital and commercial capital to promote the continued value from the circular economy and its principles. At the Sterling One Foundation, climate action is one of our thematic focus areas, and these are our commitments. We commit to supporting sustainable enterprises, and this initiative here is just one of so many other things we do. You can reach out to us to know more. Of course, we prioritize strategic partnerships and knowledge and inclusion. On that note, I would like to once more welcome you all to this very, very insightful session on driving the growth of the circular economy in ESG, and I would also add applying it to your businesses. I would also like to really appreciate our partners and our speakers. I am looking forward to learning a lot today. So you can get out your pen and paper. Thank you. Welcome again to ESG Webinar Series 4.0. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro, for that fantastic introduction. You've already laid a solid context, actually starting from the conversation around what ESG is about, what the acronym means, and then it down to the implementation, why reporting is very important. And you now went down to break it down to the circular economy, talking about the reuse, the recycle, and the reduce waste, and the importance of circular economy in terms of the waste management, reducing cost, and also the drives climate action investments in that space. So I would just like to add that one of the things why this is also very important is that I don't know how many of you are aware that the federal government of Nigeria has finally approved, the president has approved the Nigeria Carbon Market Framework. And with the approval of the Carbon Market Framework and the Carbon Market Manual Procedure, and which is very important milestone that happened last week in Abuja, that approval. With that, Nigeria is on the pathway to set up a carbon market. And again, part of that carbon market conversation is that the circular economy will play a lot in that conversation in terms of how we manage our waste, how we develop carbon credits through waste reduction, which applies to emission reduction and all that. So again, I think today is going to be a very interesting one because we're going to learn a whole lot in terms of understanding SDG 12, looking at the responsible production and consumption, looking at the entire process of circularity in terms rather than linearity that Ibukwe talked about, or Pedro talked about, rather than linearity. We're looking at the process of circularity. Our nothing is wasted anymore and all that. So to introduce our first speaker today, I would like to use this honor to introduce our first panel facilitator. And Natalia Bench, she's a doctor, Dr. Natalia Bench. She's the circular director of the Circular Economy Innovation Partnership in Lagos. And this partnership focuses on research, advocacy, and programming that promotes circular economic business and investment opportunity in Nigeria. So it things at the intersection between business and investment. So finances and business and financing in Nigeria before moving to Lagos. She set up the engagement program for Egon Asset Management Responsible Investment Team in the Netherlands and headed the academic network at the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment in London. Many months before she began her career in London, first as a deal reporter and Meghan Markle, and subsequently in leadership development at Duke Corporate Education. She earned a bachelor's degree from McGill University in Canada and a PhD from the London School of Economics in the United Kingdom. She has held teaching and research positions at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in Singapore and the University of Amsterdam. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Natalia, who is an expert in circularity and the circular economy space, as she delivers this first fantastic engagement on the circularity or circular economy in the ESG space. Thank you very much and welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
I can hear you.
Great. So first, just as a caveat, it seems that I have an unstable network connection. So if I am cutting in and out, please, Godson, feel free to just chime in and cut me off. So that's the first order of business. I just want to check, should I share my slides?
Yeah, you can share your screen. Yes, you can.
Okay. All right, I will do that. All right, are you able to see the slides?
No, I've not seen the slide yet. I don't think. So I'm seeing
You don't see them?
screen, but not the
Oh,
slide.
we can see your entire screen.
The entire screen. Maybe you have to share
Okay.
as a tab.
Can you see it? Can you see it now?
No, I can see your full screen, but I can't see your presentation.
Look at
I could
me.
share on your behalf if you're having network issues while you speak through
Yes,
it.
we do.
That's okay.
We're gonna try one more time.
Okay.
All right. Is this any better?
Yes, better. Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Well, you might want to
look at
expand
that.
your
Okay.
So you
We'll
can
do
just
that now.
So just make it the slideshow. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Everyone can
You're
see
good to go
now.
Yes, please.
Yeah, you can see
Awesome.
it. Fine.
So now you can tell what generation I belong to. Given how long it took me to open up my slides. But I'm really pleased to be here today. Just in terms of the topics I was asked to cover or meant to cover today, there's 4 specific ones. First, I was introduced as the Circular Economy Innovation Partnership, which is an organization we run, but I'm here. I'm representing the Circular Business Platform, which is another organization we run in partnership with the Consulate General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Lagos. So I'll share a little bit about what that is. And then I would go into a little bit more about what the circular economy framework is, although I think Pedro did an excellent job of covering that in the beginning. I'll just connect it a little further to the whole ESG story in terms of where we see activity happening in terms of investment and innovation, and try the call to action. So there we go. So in terms of this platform, this is set about 3 odd years or so ago, and it was formed with the view that there was sort of more coordination needed across private sector organizations to support market development and business opportunity for circular businesses. So this was something that was set up again in partnership with the Dutch Enterprise Agency, and as I mentioned, the consulate but mainly driven by the interests and input from private sector organizations. So this is an independent organization that's governed by different kinds of institutions that have an interest, so SMEs, startups, corporates, research institutions that have an interest to build this market in Nigeria. So we call ourselves an ecosystem building organization. So our real interest is really to build the market and build market opportunity for businesses or organizations that are trying to develop circular business models. Primarily what that means in practice in terms of the activities that we do, it's a lot of ecosystem mapping, holding events that support the development of circular business models and support trade and knowledge development. And again, this being a Sterling One Foundation event, supporting also mobilization of access to capital and financing, specifically for the startup and small businesses in Nigeria. Okay, so in terms of when we talk about what circular economy means for the and its connection to sorry, just one moment. In terms of well, I think part of the same family, like this concept around that you have a tool that's focused on value creation, whereas ESG is also looking at that as well. So if we think of the whole corporate sustainability or social responsibility movement as emerging in around the 1970s, where there's a lot of concerns about business behavior and the role of business in society, which began as maybe more of a regulatory conversation or a social responsibility conversation, that really evolved into a discussion around or concepts around that actually these paying attention to the environment and paying attention to the business's role in relationship with its customers and in terms of the communities where it's working. This is actually a competitive advantage, and this is in both the in both corporate social in both ESG and circular economy. These are really the same side of that coin. They're both saying we do material aspects. Like there's material and there's value created looking at these non-financial issues, and so that's where they're. I think we see this most when we look at the basic kind of circular economy model, this loop model. That helps to understand this. Here they're saying, and what really at the fundamental, and again, I think Paige really did a great job of describing this, is that fundamentally the circular economy approach is saying, well, if we use materials, we reuse materials, and we extract the most value from those materials, and we're going to create more value. We're going to improve efficiency. We're going to protect the environment, and we're going to build the economy at the same time. So that's effectively what the message is of circular economy. And in addition to that, the view is that this can happen at any stage of the process of production. It can happen at production. this is effectively where look at how ESG can fit the economy. Is that it's really by saying by adopting these practices, we're going to be meeting targets around sustainability and around the environment as well. But in Africa, and I think elsewhere, this model doesn't sit that well, and there's a few reasons for this. So if we look at, for example, this specific flow of this loop model, things like energy and material input, these can be very, very expensive. Production and design, this doesn't necessarily happen in Nigeria. So there's a lot of investment that's needed to actually create that value. So although in principle, there's the orientation of circular economy is towards value creation, what we see in practice is there's a lot of hurdles in terms of getting us to this space where actually these approaches can really work in practice, in terms of creating the business models and the value that's needed for corporates to really see something on their bottom line. And then in the Nigerian context, and I think in other developing economies as well, I think we're really focused on how we can create value from waste so we can build better infrastructure to collect and support growth and more safe and dignified jobs. And this is an approach that we're most familiar with in the circular economy space in Nigeria. We see a lot of companies, startups that are looking to incentivize both for individuals and for companies, and there's some limitations. So this is a picture. A lot of, even in this site, for example, there's actually effort to take the materials out of it that have some value, but the infrastructure that's needed to actually really create the value from these materials is missing, and it's a lot of money. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to a commercial business model as well. So I personally have a hard time when I see these kinds of, this is the state of in many cases in Nigeria, to more corporate innovation budget and the kind of idea of value creation. But that said, we still see really the emergence of a lot of small businesses that are working to build really the value chains that make this kind of collection safer, and can build it, and are building the recycling industry as well. But I would just caution that right now, as it stands, the ideas around circular economy and ESG, they're more of a vision where we need to build pathways to get there than a given. So there's a lot of practicalities that we need to think about in terms of really building this value further. And then in terms of thinking about ecosystems, I think, as has been rightly said, and it's great to hear that Sterling One Foundation is very much focused on partnerships, because I think this is really critical in any space that we're working in. That in circular economy, in any business around circular economy, an ecosystem approach is needed, and this is for multiple reasons. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's just circular economy; it's kind of any business environment really needs a focused development in the if we're building ecosystems. But in circular economy specifically, I think there's a few reasons why this is important. So one is in terms of the waste streams. We really, if you want to create that value, you need off-takers for the waste, and there's a whole set of infrastructure around this. So, for example, here we have a picture, and this is, I think, in Anambra State, where there's a, this is again an example of a small waste aggregator that incentivizes people with points so they collect waste and give it to the center, who then pays them back in appliances or sell to some, depending on whatever kind of material you have, this takes a long time. So for example, something like our PET, so the bottles we drink of Coca-Cola or water bottles, there's an emerging industry around this. You have, it's one material, you drink it, you can collect it, there can be somebody else that can easily pack it, and there's some more, and there's money that's being given through things like EPR systems that allows demand to grow. I think also in addition to that, you have producers in country who can use materials. So even in that example, I think in the PET example, there's a lot of complaints that the margins don't work and so forth. You at least have the infrastructure available in terms of the participants in the chain in country and some set of regulation, as well as financing that helps it. But it gets more complicated when you're looking at more complex materials. Something like clothing that we may think is being fairly simple is actually quite complex to offtake and to recycle at scale. And we've had a lot of conversations around this with recyclers who try to collect and try to build that infrastructure. It's very difficult. So the ecosystem is extremely important, because you need everybody in that chain, in the value chain, aligned in terms of supply and demand. You need the supporting regulation that incentivizes demand for products that are more recyclable or less harmful to the environment. And then you need the financing mechanisms that help recyclers get the capital expenditure that they need to really succeed. And this is quite difficult to do, especially because when we're looking at recycling at an industrial scale, it's very expensive. It's in the even for like a PET plant can be in the tens of millions of dollars. So it's very critical. Now, in terms of but that said, we still see the development of small ecosystems emerging, right from starting from a research and development standpoint to building the networks, the offtake networks, and so forth, that really help the businesses succeed and help the demand for recycled materials grow. So I think this is a great example that I have here is of a company called EcoBarter, which is based in Abuja. And they, through the support of a program with UNIDO, developed in country a reverse vending machine. So the vending machine that you see in this picture is it's entirely designed and manufactured in Nigeria, and it is used by Nigerian customers, where basically, effectively, it's a box where it's and that's placed in high traffic areas where people can just add in their throw in their plastic waste, and then they get a purchase on their credit. On their phone, they get a record on their phone of the value of the waste that they've deposited in the box. And this, again, from an ecosystem standpoint, is very interesting because the box is just a piece of infrastructure, but the company itself is collaborating with collectors, with different kinds of spaces, and with the government to be able to pilot it and really make it work. So it's selling the equipment, but then working for success. In this case, the technology is really developed for a Nigerian market in the sense that it has all the kind of backups in terms of energy and so forth that make it usable when a generator is not available, but also it's cheaper to produce and more simple to repair, so it can be used in this environment in a much more easier way. So now in terms of investment and innovation opportunities, so I didn't really talk and discuss too much around circular business models, but there is a huge variety of business models. When we talk about circular economy, there's a huge variety of business models. And in Nigeria, at this moment, the main focus is on recovery and recycling businesses or waste valorization. But that said, even in that one category of business, there's also a huge variety. And what a startup needs is very different from an investment from a large processing facility. So there's a huge range of tools that are needed and that have been used in this market to build circular business models. And I think just some examples is where we've seen scale is, for example, there's bridge financing is an important one, and this helps in terms of exporting for like recyclers or aggregators that need to export their materials. This is a really critical type of investment that's needed. We've seen corporate investment being really successful. I think I saw a case here of Unilever, which was very active in supporting recyclers. We also see we've seen partnerships between German recyclers and local ones in terms of providing equipment in exchange for sending inputs for their own facilities as well. So there's a lot that can be done with corporate types of corporate financing that help to address some of the issues around access to credit here as well, and issues around equity of businesses. Another type of investment I think that's really important is one like R&D focused investment. So this is, I think, recognizing that in many cases, circular business models in Nigeria, they're not commercial at this stage, and I think that's okay. And if we look at it from an ESG lens or the opportunity lens, it's okay to say we need to invest more to explore a certain area, and ways structures that can create success, and I would maybe draw attention to which done work with institution to really develop their products and develop their own business model. So partnership with universities and with both local and international ones provides this kind of funding, non-commercial funding that allows, I think, a number of businesses or business models in this area, like more experimentation with business models in this area. I think things like social impact bonds, and we've seen quite some success with those kinds of tools as well. And another area that's really important that we're still looking at, and I think was mentioned, is around carbon credits and plastic credits. But I would be very cautious in this respect to say that we still don't have the for carbon credits to really make a difference in terms of building like opportunities, especially for small and medium enterprises, which I know is a significant number of businesses that are operating in this space. So that is one that I think we need a lot more work on, and also to advocate a lot more on to make sure that any kinds of mechanisms that are developed do help benefit that kind of set of stakeholders. I think there's, again, I could go on and on about the different kinds of investment and innovation opportunities. So I'll stop there, but I think there's more. And I should also point out that together with one of the goals of the consulate in particular that we work very closely with is to mobilize funding for SMEs that addresses some of the issues we hear often about around issues around the cost of capital, and so how to make that access to funding that's not necessarily a grant, but allows businesses to participate more meaningfully in terms of like the overall financing system. This is, I think, a really, really critical piece that we're working on. But that said, that comes with the caveat that there's also the expectation of businesses that they're ready even for that kind of investment. So even investment that doesn't have has a low cost of capital does require it has some due diligence work that's needed to make sure that business is really ready to make best use of that capital. And then in terms of call to action, I'm sorry, I only have one graphic of the activities that we're working on right now. But I think I presented a picture that's a little bit more complex around what circular economy is, and it's in terms of the benefit to ESG. I think there is benefit, but I think we need to work harder to really realize that benefit. So we do run a number of programs to support further engagement on this topic. One of them, the only one I have an image of right now is a Circle Hub. So this is a program that we have that we're working on with the Enterprise Development Center. And an international Circle Hub that's effectively a training or a process where businesses that are already producing can look at building new opportunities or new business models using circular principles. So this is a key one when we're again trying to connect the ESG to the circular economy. We think this would be a great opportunity. Secondly, we also we run a number of communities around for startups, for example, around prototype development for young professionals, around building their careers in the circular economy. We're working on a circular economy week in February that would also be addressing a number of the issues I touched on in terms of access to finance and in terms of building these opportunities for businesses, startups, and so forth to build their customer base and support research and development. So, for anyone who's interested to build their business model, get those clients, and think about the type of capital that they need, they really hope that they enjoy that. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We're always open, us and the team, anyone on the team is always open to speak further and make sure that you have the support that you need to maximize how you use circular economy principles to build business models that are great value for consumers in Nigeria. And I guess have the bottom line and the top line as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Natalie, for that presentation. Yeah, I think it was a very interesting one. And it's good to see available models in the market in our country, Nigeria, to see what people are doing in terms of trying to drive the circular economy. I know that we still need to scale as a country. And also, we also need the big businesses to also be part of it so that the essence of that circularity in terms of rethinking our production structure so that we can be able to address that circularity from that production itself can be achieved. I think we've not seen, okay, hold on. I think there's some questions. I think there's some questions on the Q&A box so that you can provide, since you still have time, it would be nice for, we have, okay, we have some questions, and since you still have time, it will be nice for you to just take the session further in terms of providing questions, answers to these questions at this time. So one of the questions is saying that, okay, one of the questions is saying one, okay, how can an organization ensure that circular economy practices are truly impactful? They are not greenwashing. It's not just an attempt to greenwash. They're truly impactful. That's one question. Then the second question is speaking to, you can take this and check the chat bar. I think there's some other questions. But number one is saying, how can circular economy ensure that circular economy practices are actually impactful and not greenwashing, not in the context of greenwashing? And also in terms of another question is talking about how can organizations measure and report circularity based on their sustainability reporting. Now, through their sustainability reporting, when they are disclosing their sustainability performance in the financial year, at the end of the financial year, how can they measure and report on circularity? So those are the two questions. I don't know if you want to take this first before we move to other questions. Hello? Dr. Lee, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay, so the question is, what are the key barriers organizations face? Do you want me, the first one, do you want me to answer those now?
Yes, the first one is looking at the
Okay.
circular economy in terms of the practices. How organizations can actually, practice circular economy. How circular economy practices are actually impactful and not greenwashing. That's the first question. How organizations can ensure that circular economy practices are actually impactful and not greenwashing. That's the first question. And the second question is, how can organizations actually report? How can they measure and report their circular economy practices when they are disclosing their sustainability performance at the end of the financial year?
Yeah, I think those are really good questions and really valid, especially from the ESG standpoint. I have to say, I always find the reporting and greenwashing issue a challenging one, and we all know that we're in a very data poor environment, so it makes it even harder. I think the first point is, when we talk about ESG, it's around the materiality issue. So I would go really to that. So it's like, what practices are really material for the business, and if they're material, you can go through the process of deciding whether you have the data, or what kind of objectives you can set based on the data that you already have, and then building a kind of a reporting and communication strategy around that. I know that sounds a bit fluffy, but it's just exceptionally difficult to do anything else I think at this stage. And you're always going to face, again, because sustainability, circular economy, and I feel from the Nigerian environment too, there's so many pressing business issues that this is almost a nice to have. You have to have the time to think about how you're creating value, how you're impacting other people, and how it relates to the business. And this is not easy work. So my view is, don't, it's like around bringing people along, making sure that you have the materiality story covered, and that you have that value creation story covered, so that you can bring your colleagues along as well. And the impact side, there's always going to be greenwashing or circular economy washing. We have to kind of accept that as also part of the business too. The next question, oh my God, I've already forgotten this again, indication of my age. What can you remind me, Godson?
Yeah, the next question is on how organizations can actually ensure impactful circular economy practices that are not greenwashing.
So oh no, that was the I gave yeah, that was the greenwashing one.
Yes.
I think it's around integrating circular economy data into ESG reporting systems. So this again depends on the business that you are running. First you need to have again, what's the material issue? Is there adequate data? And if there isn't adequate data, then I think you have to be creative about how you're going to do it. Ultimately, my view personally is that it's less around the data that's available and more about setting up the institutional reporting framework and those relationships that's important first. Then when you have that, then you have kind of a system that is dynamic. You can learn and build from it. So that would be my recommendation. If you're just looking at setting up those systems and you don't have them operational at the moment, if you have a system that's really focused on quantitative metrics, then you really need to look at where the data is available, and this can be very challenging.
Okay, thank you. But I've seen some questions. I think we need to. So again, there's this question that speaks to how can we speak to the language? For example, how can we engage local communities in the language understand of circular economy? So how does it not become illegal, a technical jargon to them, so that these practices can also, so that they can understand some of these practices and be part of those practices? So how can we train local communities in the language that they understand? That's one question. Another question from this same person, Jaffe, he said, so how can communities see themselves? So I think the questions can be interrelated. So how can communities see themselves through the lens of circular economy? So how can we train communities in the language that they will understand circular economy so they can practice circular economy? And how can communities see themselves in the light of circular economy? I don't know if you can give us.
Yeah, I think those are great questions. And honestly, I don't think at the end of the day, circular economy is really that complex. And I'm sorry if I made it sound complex. So in what our experience in the Nigerian context, it's around the waste to value, that you can make money from waste is the most important way that, or the most common way that we see people engage on this. But we also see a lot of civil society organizations first engaging on issues that matter to communities, and then weaving in, so it could be around building trades or building schools, and then weaving in that goal with things like waste collection and environmental preservation, and which has also been really, really effective. So I would also want to emphasize that in most communities, circular in Nigeria, I really think it's a very circular country. There's a lot of reuse of materials. There's a lot of maximizing materials until they are really, really at their end of life. And it should be celebrated among anyone that's doing that. So recognizing that from the beginning. The key issue in Nigeria is how waste is disposed. That makes it unsafe, and this is expensive to manage, and it puts people in these communities at risk. So the more they understand that there's a value for them, and if you have a long time to engage, and working on those more structural issues can be very, very helpful.
Okay, thank you for that. So there's a question on funding. So Goze believes that the innovative projects in terms of circular economy projects and accessing funding is a challenge. And the question is, where do we access funding?
Yeah, it's not getting any easier. So it depends. So if you're looking for grants, honestly, this is the it's super tough. I think USA like killed a lot of opportunities. I think a lot of projects that were in process. And then we see like from a grant standpoint, it's drying up and it's getting more and more competitive. And this is why we hear often how organizations are trying to more develop business models or more value creation opportunities that can allow them to access funds that are more associated with seed funding, with concessional finance, and those kinds of opportunities. This is also really, really difficult. But as I said, I think if you're looking in the space, the first place to, a good place to look is looking at the research and development side. I think that's an underlooked area. It all requires a lot of work to do, but this is something that I think has been underutilized, and there is opportunities with that. And to do that, you need to kind of develop your ideas and then find research institutions to work with you as well. Find those communities, find a business model, and then find those research institutions that have that ability to make grant applications from a research standpoint. So that would be one pathway I would suggest, in addition to the typical ones.
Okay, I think that's a good one. So there's this that Aditotun is essentially has developed a freezer solution that supports circularity and renewable energy. So it's asking for collaboration, if there's opportunity for collaboration. So I think Natalia dropped her contact, so you can engage Natalia on that separately. Okay, those who have asked for opportunity for collaboration, I think you can engage Natalia on that because she dropped her contact already, or you can engage with the Tele One Foundation to be able to guide on that. So I think basically these are the questions.
Yeah, if you have ideas, you have business models specifically. We don't have as much expertise on NGO or civil society activity. We are always open to talk and think about and help you map out where you might want to drive something. We're always there to listen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Natalia, for the very interesting facilitation on the circular economy, ESG in Nigeria. And thank you for presenting us with the cases that you presented. So it gives us a sense, and also I think our participants would agree, it gives us a sense of that the conversation around circularity is not just a technical conversation or a bogus conversation or some esoteric conversation in the air, but it also connects with what we do in our everyday lives and what our people, like somebody was saying on the chat, that Nigerians already live circularity. And you said that even from even the fact that maybe in our production systems we've not really integrated it to depth, that we don't repair things, we keep things, we reuse things and all that, and we don't really, discard things arbitrarily in terms of understand these assets from that consumption part of it. And so I think it's been a very fantastic couple of minutes that we've spent with you. And I think it broadens our understanding and broadens our perspective the more on why circular economy is very important, or why circular economy is within our reach, or why all businesses need to do to be able to address circular economy. On investment opportunities also, that is called the economic space. And for those who want to engage Natalia in terms of possible collaboration based on ideas that you have, you can engage with the 31 Foundation. They can work with you on that in terms of doing that. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for gracing our invitation and for delivering such a fantastic, delivery on this topic in such a fantastic way. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll go back over to the next session. to listen to our next speaker on this. And our next speaker is Fabian Sukul. He's a business development manager, B Lab Africa. Fabian is business B Lab Africa, where he helps companies across the continent navigate the B Corp certification process and integrate sustainability into their business strategies. He has expertise in business development, impact measurement, and stakeholder engagement, and works with companies to assess their social and environmental performance using the B Impact Assessment, BIA, and fosters a network of purpose-driven businesses. Fabian is passionate about driving Africa's economic transformation through responsible business practices. He plays a key role in organizing B Lab Africa's events and initiatives which bring together businesses, policymakers, and community leaders to share best practices and inspire change. Before joining B Lab Africa, Fabian gained extensive experience in business strategy and development, working across sectors such as sustainability, corporate social responsibility, and impact investment. Fabian is committed to creating long-term positive impact by supporting companies that prioritize both profits and purpose. Please join me in welcoming Fabian to deliver the second session on empowering businesses to lead in circular economy. Fabian, you're welcome.
Thank you. That was quite an introduction. I'm very pleased for this opportunity. Thank you very much to you and your team and Olapeju. We've been working towards this for a while, and it's really nice that we're finally able to join and speak to your community and showcase some of our work and speak on how that has then been able to turn around fortunes in great positive ways for the businesses. So again, pleased to be here today. I'll be speaking on empowering businesses to lead in the circular economy. And the first few slides of my presentation are going to cover a bit of what Olapeju spoke about. There's also going to be quite a bit of overlaps here and there, but I'll try and speak more precisely in reference to the topic and the work that we do and how that has been impactful positively to the businesses that we work with. So getting straight into it. So there you go. So I work for B-Lab. B-Lab is a global organization that's the force behind B Corp certification. I'll speak more about B Corp certification towards the end. But so out of that, then we have different global partners. And I'm part of the Africa Global Partner. We are a not-for-profit, and our mission is to drive towards a positive economic systems change that then advances equitability, fairness, and justice to ensure that there is positive benefit to stakeholders in businesses. So stakeholders, you're talking about teams in those organizations, you're talking about funders, investors or banks, we're talking about suppliers, we're talking about the communities where they operate and how they get to benefit from that business being successful or being in the region or the community where they live in. So getting straight into the topic. So what is circular economy? And I know this was discussed before, but again, it's extremely important that I also speak about it in terms and in regards, and particularly to contextualize it to our certification, because we were a certifying body. So circular economy, in the way our businesses interpret it and execute it within their business model and operations, is an economic systems change that works to redefine that the way businesses design and conduct their production, right? And then how they then encourage responsible consumption, and particularly also, and very uniquely, how they then manage the waste that comes from what it is that they produce and then pass on to the consumers for consumption, to make sure that all that process is responsible, can be tracked, and can be improved continuously. It's extremely important that every aspect of production is measured, because without that in place, then it's extremely difficult to make decisions or to improve on those systems and processes, right? So moving on, yeah, so maybe to speak a little bit more also specific and in comparison to the two specific economic models. So circular economy and linear economy, and in the work that we do, we look at circular economy as design, not just production, but design production. And what is design production? Design production is, say, for example, we have companies that are in, say, liquor production. They make alcohol or they make soft drinks. And so design production in a business like that would mean that that business has specific ingredients that they use for their beverages. So say, for example, if it's an alcoholic cider that is then themed as pineapple flavored or mint flavored, then what then does that actually mean? That means that business is intentional to then work with farmers who produce organic mint or organic pineapple, and they then work and empower that farmer, right? Not just source from them, but then empower to make sure that, for example, that farmer ensures that they harvest that fruit only when it's mature, and they are not motivated by profits, and they cut corners and, you want a pineapple, I'll get you pineapples. But so there's an actual process from planting to how you then manage the irrigation, the pesticides, that if you have to use those, and perhaps they can only be organic, just to make sure that there is no contamination in that fruit. And then it has to go through the seasons to make sure that the flavors are balanced, so that that particular drink tastes the same every time your customer buys it, because then that's how you get buy-in from that customer. That's what we mean when we say design production. It goes further also to speak about consumption, and it's to make sure that that business understands what is required of them. So if it's an alcoholic beverage, then it's very clear from the marketing bodies and global operations and standards that every time you're selling an alcoholic drink, then you must ensure it bears very clear indicative messaging that this drink can only be consumed by people who are above the age, according to that jurisdiction, to consume alcohol, and that it can then, what are the consequences or repercussions if you overtake, right? Or if you overindulge. It also goes further ahead, and what's the waste management? So is this drink being supplied in a glass bottle? Is it being supplied in a plastic tumbler? Or is it being supplied in a can? And that business then has a way to track and ensure that we can track every can that was then brought in, cleaned, filled, and then dispatched. We have those numbers, or we have a unique way of tracking it. And at the end of the year, then we can look. We had this batch throughout the year, and here is what we can then account for. So then we know, for example, we've been able to, for example, pollute this much, and we're working towards making sure that we have a reduction on that year on year moving forward, or we find a more sustainable way. For example, like how can we then have customers return those, and then, for example, I don't know, get a discount, but there's an incentive around making sure that you have that track in place and you're able to account for what it is that you're putting out there. So that is the way practically would look at a circular economy when we speak about it. But then in comparison, then we also have to look at linear economy. And I think it's important for me also at this point to articulate that based on the McKinsey report on consumption, I think last year, and I can share that later on, it was reported that Gen Zs and millennials, at least a very good percentage of them, above 65%, are more intentional about consuming products that are responsibly produced. And this is a global research and survey that was shared. I'll make sure to share that somewhere on the link as I move along my presentation. Yeah, but then seeing that and seeing this, then this speaks to what people are now aspiring to, because customers are conscious customers, and they want to make sure that what I'm consuming and what I'm partaking is produced responsibly, goes a long way in making sure that it leaves a very thriving environment that is regenerative, and the businesses are responsible in everything that they do. And as a conscious consumer, I understand that takes investment from the business, and I'm willing to pay that extra value because that is extended convenience that fits well with what I believe in. Now, when you look at linear economy, it's pretty straightforward. It's more driven by being able to do what needs to be done at the very basic level and being able to then recoup as much as possible. The thing about it is, it's pretty straightforward. It works, but it's not sustainable. You can't run it for the long run. And unfortunately, also businesses that are in this model and that are not then switching and moving on to the more responsible circular economy is that they don't have a very long lifespan. And the reason for that is because their processes are not resilient because there is not as much investment and they don't have any unique proposition that then distinguishes them from their competition. So that also becomes an issue. So moving forward, so what are the principles? And I know Lapeju spoke about them, but again, like I said, it's important for me to also articulate them practically to how we operate as we move on to then advance the discussion. So I have, so if you look at circular economy, for example, it has the 3 R's in mind. And then there's a design, right, on how that waste isn't going to be absorbed back and how that waste isn't going to be managed to make sure that it does not go to cause any more harm into the environment. There's also an intention to ensure that the products are kept in production or in use as long as possible. And I spoke about the example of the glass bottles. And I'll give specific examples towards the end. But so for example, a company like African Originals, which is one of our case studies that I'll be showcasing shortly, they ensure that tracking is there. And every time their beer is packed in the glass bottles, and those glass bottles are then used and brought back, they are not going out to source for more from China or manufacture more from around where they operate, but they are then partnering with a local organization that does cleaning and making sure that they're properly cleaned and they are reused. It also goes further and speaks on how then you have to then regenerate natural resources. So think about a dairy company, and one of our certified dairy companies in Nigeria is Danone. They also call that palm milk in Ghana. And one of the things I know they do, and they do very well, is recycling water. So the water that is required. So if you measure all the way to the unit production for a liter of water, for a liter of milk, either, so it depends on the unit that's being production. So is it a liter of milk? Is it 500 grams of butter? Is it like maybe like 100 grams of cheese? Or whatever product it is. They are able to measure down to the amount of water that's required to then make that production. Now, what that does is then it gives a very clear indication of how they're consuming the water. And then they're then able to go back and look at their spending and their cost. And they realize that we can then turn this around and either scale this down or we can then reuse this water. And a lot of the times we've seen, and this is very common now within our big corps, and especially in that sector, production and manufacturing, that they are then able to come back and then once they run the processing and they've made the production and there's this much water that's required either to clean the production line before they put in the next product, then they track that amount of water and then they separate it. They then put it through a recycling process. And then from that recycling process, based on the results, and they're able to determine, is this clean enough to then go in and be reused? Or can we then reuse this, for example, watering our garden or cleaning our vehicles or whatever other use that they need? But that has now become a common practice. And what it has done is then month on month, they're then able to imagine if your water cost was, say, I don't know, $2,000 US. right? And then you're able to cut it maybe to $500 month on month. That money, which would have been a fixed expense month on month, paying for your water, now is retained and becomes a contributor or a factor of your revenue year on year. So that is the sort of impact, practical example or practice that circular economy hasn't been able to unlock for businesses. If you look at the flip side on the other side, it's pretty straightforward. Get your raw materials, put them through typical production processes, and then produce as much as you can. There obviously, the other thing I think that is important for me to also iterate, because we also have to look at both sides. Products that are manufactured through circular economy are obviously going to cost a little bit more because of the investment compared to products or services that come from the linear economy model. And that's just because there's not as much investment here and there's not as much consideration. However, looking forward and projecting to the future, that will quickly switch. And I think it's also more driven, like I said, by surveys that are being done and what people are clearly seeing and where people's or consumption aspirations are leading towards. Now, so why is circular economy gaining so much momentum today? So one of the things is, I think this is just to reinforce what I've said before. Circular economy goes a long way in ensuring that it's a solution to provide to the economical challenges that we have. I think it's very clear. I know some influential people like to say that this is not the case, but we all live in this planet and we can see what that's becoming. So definitely, circular economy definitely goes to address some of the challenges. Now, it's very common for rivers to dry out. It's very common for the weather patterns to change. It's very common for farmers to plant and not have, rainwater or not be able to irrigate their plants, something that wasn't a phenomenon many years back. So it's just common sense that we then have to start to think about where did we go wrong and how can we fix this. I think circular economy is very well in that logic. Secondly, that definitely does recognize the shrinking resources and also the current consumption patterns. And we can all see that the direction that we're going is not going to be very sustainable in coming years. And therefore, we now have to then pump the brakes a little bit, review everything that we're doing, and then work on that to ensure that hey, moving forward for the future generations and even for us in our old age, then we're still able to turn around the life and the quality of life that we currently have, or even better. Thirdly, deploying that model or encouraging that model and having businesses adopt that model ensures that we are then able to extract the maximum value on our resources, right? Glass bottles, for example, are made from, and I stand to be corrected because I know there's different qualities, but they're made from sand and limestone. You can imagine if every other beverage that you buy that is in glass, or even the cups that we use at home, or even the plates that we use at home, or even our car windshield and all those things, you can imagine if people were not intentional to then recycle and then reuse and reproduce those in short years, then we could easily have depleted the sands in our rivers or the limestones in our quarries. And I mean, also imagine the process of having to extract that. We are ferrying trucks, they're all polluting, we're spending money in moving these raw materials up and down. So it's just, again, this is clearly how the future has to take shape and move along. It also goes a long way to minimize waste, pollution, and depletion of natural resources. And that is in the sense of the more we are able to become responsible and we are able to become intentional about how we're doing these things, then we go a long way in making sure that pollution and depletion of natural resources is capped. Obviously, also reduction of ecological footprint and being able to preserve what we currently already have for future generations. Even if we don't improve on it, at least we keep it as it is, if that's the best that we can do. Now, why are companies central to driving sustainable growth across Africa? So one, I think we all know, and hopefully it becomes even more clear now, that the actual drivers of economic systems change, behavioral change, government alignment, the people who really drive the agenda are businesses, right? And businesses being able to do that, then it goes a long way in making sure that government then quickly adapts and government is then able to move along. I think also the other really cool thing about it is that when that happens, then it's very easy to then grow economies. It's also very easy to then turn around actual great opportunities for people to find work, because now people imagine the businesses that we work with, and they're very intentional about sourcing from local farmers, right? By doing so, that farmer gets to then sell their products for a premium, and that premium then is able to then empower that farmer to then go ahead and take care of their family, their children, give them, nutritional foods, better education, healthcare, as you can imagine, live in safe environments and communities because everyone is empowered and they have a way to generate income. So then it's a safe environment. I think secondly is that businesses are always very keen to deploy frameworks or methodologies that then help them to become extremely lean, but very efficient and effective, right? And circular economy delivers that. It's quite an investment in the beginning, but along the path, it then helps a business to achieve that. The way this works is, for example, if a business maybe in one of the big national parks in South Africa, Kruger National Park, for example, decides that we're going to deploy solar power to power our camps, to run their EV or run their land cruisers or trucks as they move tourists in the park, then what that does is, one, that business is cutting cost in terms of fuel. And you can imagine how much that is, even for like maybe a day's trip, right? But the actual investment in the beginning is quite heavy. But then in 3-4 years, they are then able to repay back or recoup that investment. And from then on, what would have then been set aside as a budget month on month, year on year, to fuel their vehicles, to power, their showers, or to power the rooms, or whatever other power requirements within that camp, have then been taken out. So again, that is now retained as revenue within the business. Now, and out of doing that, then that business starts to become extremely competitive compared to their competition, because if there are other lodges within that do not have the same deployed within the operations, then what it means is that this other lodges then has more money to maybe set aside for their marketing budget. It has more money maybe to set aside for their outreach, to get more paying clients, to pay more for their teams, so they get the more skilled teams, better chefs, better baristas, better managers, better customer service. And by doing so, then they become extremely competitive compared to the alternative. Now, and then lastly, I think being able to innovate and collaborate as well also opens up market opportunities. By doing this, a business also becomes extremely, because what this does is then it opens up business to then, third-party verifiers. It opens a business to third-party verifiers. It opens a business to, say, investors, and they're able to see this business, because now investors are themed. Investors are either investing in businesses that are climate savvy, in businesses that are keen to provide employment to people who do not have employment. Investors are also keen on ensuring, for example, that they're investing in businesses that are addressing climate challenges. And a business that has gone ahead and deployed these operational changes within the operations then stands very competitive and attractive to an investor as well. So now I think it would be nice to showcase some of our examples of B Corps that are leading with purpose and practical pathways to circularity. And allow me to then go on to the first one. I hope you can see this screen. Somebody please confirm. Can someone please confirm they can see my screen? Not able to confirm if.
Yeah, I can see your screen. Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, good, great. So yeah, so I'll go to. So this is a company that's also a certified B Corp. They operate in Nairobi. So they make alcoholic ciders, iced teas, and they package them. And they're one of the fledgling businesses. Yeah, so this is their sustainability report. Feel free to check them out. But I'll go particularly to page 14, just to then quickly show you how they've been able to deploy this within the operations. Sorry, what page is this? Yeah, so I wanted to showcase. No, sorry. Okay. It's not the page. Just give me 1 second. 21. Yeah, this is it. So for example, you can see, so this is the actual bottles for their ciders. And so what this business has been able to do, and you can see they've been tracking the number last year and this year. So they set themselves a Packmat sustainability initiative, for example. So we use 40% of glass purchased by 2024, eliminate plastic in production by 2026, and reduce paper reliance by 2027. So you can see it's a very clear goal. But then to get there, then they also have to track everything that they are doing. And they have mechanisms where they track every of their glass that is produced, and they're then able to show how then that is able to be recycled. Now, one of the things that they've set themselves to achieve also, and that is not noted here, is to ensure that by 2027, their glass bottles do not have to be recycled every 3 years, as currently is. But then they can get a very high quality glass bottle that they can then infinitely use. All they have to do is, once it's emptied or consumed, then they just send it to a cleaner. The cleaner then cleans it and sends it back. So in 2024, for example, you can see they reuse 25% of their glass. The non-reusable glass is crushed into cullets, so into small pieces, which is then put back into the production and then used to make a new glass. Now, they were able to do that to the tune of 27%. For 2025, they set themselves to do it to 40%. But then the goal here is to ensure that moving forward, they then do not have to crush that glass after 3 uses, but then have a glass that they can then reuse infinitely. And clearly you can see how much that is going to save them. Now, if you were to move also to very clear specifics, you can see they were able to track. For example, this is our paper waste in terms of kilograms. Again, this is then sent out to paper processors who then recycle it, and they're then able to reproduce it for their packaging at a cheaper cost. They've also tracked their plastic use, metallic use, medical waste, organic, and then glass. That's one. I think another one that I would like to also showcase would be, I need to move this. Just please bear with me as I need to find out how to move this. Greenspoon, for example, also. And Greenspoon is, again, it's a marketplace that then provides home supplies, okay, And so, for example, they set themselves out. So they are going to reduce their packaging by 20%. They are going to onboard 88 more small farmers, and then they're going to deploy 38 solar panels. Obviously, that goes a long way in making sure that they reduce their energy cost. And the reason for that is because their delivery vehicles are electric vehicles and they need continuous charging. So they're able to generate a lot of that power from their solar farm. I think lastly, I would also like to showcase Mr. Green. And Mr. Green, for example, is a proper circular economy business. They operate in the waste management, and Mr. Green collects all the plastic waste and then they repurpose it to different food grade plastics. And that is now used by different companies for their packaging. So if you look at this, for example, one of the things Mr. Green Africa has done is it has provided employment to people who would otherwise not get employment, which is to say that the people who supply these plastics to them can be anyone who's able to move around and collect plastics. They have that opportunity for them. You just have to register with them. You can bring in your plastics, ramp it up to a certain number, and then get your payout. I think the other really good thing about them is that they've also gone further, and now they're encouraging a behavioral change within different estates around the country. And what they've done is they've set out cages, plastic cages in these estates, and people are then able to then separate, say, plastic waste, pack it in those cages, and the company, the estate then gets the cumulative waste that is collected from them. Then the estate gets paid by Mr. Green Africa every time they collect that, which is to say, this is a new income that's going to these people that they will otherwise not have. And then on top of that, Mr. Green then has a very unique way of collecting this waste without necessarily having to invest so much. So those are some of the examples. And then lastly, I just wanted to share this last bit of my presentation. So what is B Corp certification? B Corp certification is an assessment that allows businesses to assess their processes on governance, workers, community, environment, and customers. The process begins with a company doing an assessment. That assessment then leads to an evaluation. And if the evaluation is successful, then the business does a verification process, and then it becomes certified as a B Corp. A certified B Corp is a company that has been found to meet the highest standards of social environment, environmental performance, transparency, and financial accountability. And they have to go through a third-party verifier. And once that's confirmed, then the business is certified as a B Corp. This is a screenshot of some of our B Corps. If you can recognize any, I'm happy to pause here for a few minutes. Or you can just go on the chat and type the one that you recognize. Yeah, but are you interested in B Corp certification? Please scan the QR code. I'm happy to follow up later and get into a discussion and take you through the process. Thank you. I'll pause there for now. I don't know if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fabian. I think it was a really engaging one, very interesting conversation in terms of how you were able to break it down from even taking note from Natalie and also clearly articulating what this means from linear to circularity, and again breaking it down to what it means in terms of reduction of ecological footprint, environmental externalities reduction, and I think it was very good. And also, for those who are interested in the big corporation, please you can scan and also engage later from that. And if you have questions, you should ask. But there are some questions that we need to take. I don't know. Is Natalie still around? Hello. So there's a question by Simon who tried to understand how can organizations who are facing the shift from linear to circular production, how can they how can they be how can they rely on ESG metrics to overcome the confusion around shipment, the barriers that has to do with shifting from linear to circular production model? So what do they need to account for? So organizations who want to shift, who want to transform from linear production to circular production model, what do they need to know? What are the ESG metrics they need to understand? What are the practices, the ESG practices they need to account for? So that is a question from Simon. So that question from Simon looks at, so I think the questions are interrelated in a way, because the other question is about, are they best practices for integrating circular economic data into ESG reporting systems, giving current data gaps in sustainability metrics? So the first question is about how can this organization, what are the ESG practices that they need to account for in shifting from linear to circular economy? While the second question is about what are the ESG, the best practices? So they are interrelated in a way, the two questions. So basically, what are the ESG practices that would enhance organizations who want to move from linear to circular economy? I don't know if Natalie is still on the call so that she can address that question before we move on to other questions. Hello? So while we wait for that, I think there is a question for Fabian, as in Tega wants to know what benefits do companies get having B Corp certification? So having a B Corp certificate, what benefits would it amount to for a company or for any company that wants to be a member of the B Corp corporation?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. So there's quite a number. So one is, and I'll give you an example. So if you fly into the Eastern Africa region or the Southern Africa region, one of the desserts you're most likely to be served on the plane after your meal is either going to be a Danone dairy product, Danone butter, cheese, or biofoods product or dessert. Now, those two companies are also certified as B Corps. Now, what that was able to do for them is it was able to show these organizations that they were aspiring to supply to that this business has actual verifiable service level agreement practices that they've deployed within themselves and their farmers, for example, to supply the highest quality of milk. This business has also been verified to also deploy the highest production standards of their products, right? And therefore, by so doing, then the Emirates, the Kenya Airways, the Air France, then are convinced that this business, first of all, can produce products that meet the test of the clients that we have. Two, they are able to meet the requirements that we set out for them realistically, and therefore then we can onboard them. So one of the things it does is it brings a lot of credibility to our business. B Corp certification brings a lot of credibility to our business and its products. Two, it then opens up markets that you didn't have before. So I'll give you an example. The flower farms, cut flower farms in this part of the region that are then supplying to the developed markets. When they have that B Corp IP logo on their bouquet of flowers, what that consumer is then made aware is that these flowers have been produced without any child labor. There is no harmful pesticides that were used on these flowers. Hence the reason why they cost a little bit more compared to the other flowers. But I know that I'm buying a good product and I'm willing to pay more. So then what that happens to the company is that you have better brand visibility and value, but then people also pay more for your product, among others. And I think the last one is companies that certify as B Corps also become very attractive to investors because that initial layer of due diligence is covered by the B Corp assessment. Secondly, also, they are able to show the specific thematic areas that they address, and if those align with the investor, then the investor is able to see how that business is performing. And then the investment becomes a much easier discussion within them and the company, hence the attractiveness.
Thank you very much for those questions. I think the questions have been answered, Tega. Yeah. Again, there's a question that there's this when we look at government relationship with the private sector, it's always about regulation, regulation, regulation. But again, in terms of if we look at for us to drive circular economy investment and drive maybe incentivization of businesses who are already or communities who are already businesses who are already building the production systems that have factoring circular economy through integrated sustainability practices, and also communities who are at the receiving and also deploying circular economy practices and all that. What would you say would be the collaboration and government and private sector collaborate on circular economy? How can they work together? Feedback you can give based on your experience. How do you take the government, apart from regulation, how do you think government and private can work together to be able to drive circular economy practices in different markets, in particular in this part of the world and in different countries?
That's a fantastic question. If you think about it, I mean, in practice, in theory, it's pretty straightforward and it should be happening. But one of the quickest ways to turn that around is the behavioral change. Because if you look at private businesses, they have taken a lot of measures and practices to ensure that a lot of the teething problems that they have are quickly addressed. So if you look at practices like zero paper use, for example, something that is a menace in governments, right, as we know it. If you look, for example, sharing resources. Now, it's very common for businesses to share, to share offices. It's very common for businesses to share resources. They share offices, therefore they share the same power to a facility that has different businesses. They share water to a facility that has different businesses. The waste from all those businesses is then aggregated and then disposed of as one. So also that decentralization of government would also be a big factor that can then be replicated. So I think the direct answer here is replication of some of the very clear winning practices that private sector has been able to deploy, that government seems to struggle with. So that would be a good starting point, because then it's been verified it works. Businesses are saving money from it, but government is struggling with it. So just replicate that in the beginning, and government usually has a lot of influence in people. And when that's done, then you begin to achieve that behavioral change that then leads into now policymakers realizing that the people who we represent seem to go into this direction. Therefore, it's very easy for then government to then begin to factor their policies towards what it is that private sector has been able to showcase, government has been able to replicate, and now has become very beneficial to deploy.
Okay, thank you for that also. Then again, there are questions from Unamaka. I think there are two questions, but I think we can lump them together. I think it's about scaling, how organizations can scale impact over time in circular economy by deploying circular economy practices. That's one again, and that's scaling. And again, looking at because the market, the context we speak in is the context of Africa, the context of the African market. So how can African organizations and how can Africa as a continent itself be a leader in circular economy innovation? So how do we scale as companies, as organizations? That's number one. Then two, how do we become leaders in the circular economy innovation? Unamaka is trying to find out this.
That's a fantastic question. I really like these questions. So I'll begin with the first one. How do you scale as a business? I think, and I've seen this work practically. So I'll just speak about it in practice. What I've seen happen is that a business is founded, a business becomes very clear that we want to operate responsibly. How to quickly scale is to then ensure that, for example, when you're onboarding your suppliers, then you
Yeah.
communicate very clearly. We as a business, having you come on board as a supplier, are going to then adhere to the way we operate. One, we do not condone, we cannot have you influence our people in any way, either to underreport the goods that you have delivered or overreport, or make any unethical claims. And if that happens, then these are the repercussions. So before you join us, you may do it a few times and not get caught, but eventually when you get caught, then these are going to be the repercussions, and you have to sign and tie yourself down to that. Now, then it becomes very clear. All the suppliers that you're working with are going to know that, hey, for this particular organization, then this is how they operate. It could also be your teams. You make it known that as you come onto this business, the onboarding process stipulates that we have to deliver our services to this service level agreement. A customer cannot call twice and not have the phone picked. And we have tracking mechanisms to make sure that your KPIs are tied to that, and you're able to follow back and ensure that that is adhered to. So then by doing so, again, you become extremely competitive because you're really delivering quality products or services. But then two, also, as you move along, everyone understands that this is how you operate. You're very successful. They want to work with you, and therefore they have to then toe the line and move along with you. Now, in terms of, I think the second one was as leaders, how do we then ensure this happens? I think it's just realizing the current status of what people are aspiring for. People become very conscious. People have become very aspirational, and people are very outspoken now as to what they want. And people want value for what it is that they're buying, for what it is that they're getting as services, and they want to live successful lives. Now, for that to happen, then that means there has to be some certain level of comfort, which is to say, when I go, for example, to a cafeteria and people request for my feedback after I've had lunch, then I'll give my feedback, and the business is then going to then take that feedback and actually process it and make sure that next time I come, whatever it is that I wasn't happy about has been addressed. For example, I'm trying to be as practical as possible. So if it doesn't speak to the scale of thinking that you have, please feel free to flag it. But yeah, just to try and answer some of these questions. I think also as bigger businesses, the other way to address is that we also have to look at business above and beyond profits, right? Because businesses are very influential. So if you're a service or a product business, how then can you do more beyond your profits? And even if from your profits, how are you then able to empower the communities or the stakeholders that you have as a business?
Thank you again for that. Then again, there's a question from Tega that tries to find out what benefits can corporations get. So companies get from being members of big corporation that's having the big corp certificates. What are the specific benefits that these companies can get, or what does it mean to these companies?
Yeah, so let me reiterate again. So for companies, what B Corp certification means is that one, you as a business can then showcase your practices as the most scaled or the most advanced when it comes to environment, social governance, and financial accountability. Now, to be more specific, one is if, say, for example, you're looking at showing your suppliers that, look, I source a product, and I'll give an example. I'll use an actual B Corp. So we have a B Corp called Embo River Camp. Embo River Camp is a fully sustainable resort out in the Mara in Kenya. And Embo River Camp has invested in a solar farm. They've also invested in electric vehicles. Now, what that means is that, one, your land cruisers are electric powered, so they don't pollute the environment, That's one.
Yeah.
Two, you're not fueling them. So two, a tourist who is very invested in making sure that they're not just enjoying that environment and polluting, right? Two, causing noise to the animals, for example. And this is just one of the many examples. Then they're very happy to pay more to that business because that business has actually made an investment. Three, this business has also gone above and beyond, and they've understood how to then use this to their advantage. And all the waste that they get from their kitchen, they put it in the biomass, and they're then able to use that to churn around methane gas, which they then use for cooking, right? That means they cut their gas costs. That's one. Two, it means that that waste that then could have gone to waste is then used responsibly. Yeah, and those are just also like I said before, they become also very attractive to investors because investors are then able to see that this business has deployed very responsible practices. And yeah, they serve and address the customer's needs effectively.
Okay, thank you very much, Fabian, for the question. I think you've been able to address a lot of questions across different spectrum. I don't know, is Natalia still on the call? Is Natalia still on the call?
Hi.
Okay, so we have like two questions for you, but we're going to put them together. And one of the questions talks about what are the barriers, the key barriers for moving from linear to circular, and what are the ESG practices that could help to be able to overcome these barriers as an organization. So what are the barriers for an organization, and what are the practices, the ESG practices required to do that? And also the second question is almost tied to that also. Is one of the best practices for integrating circular economy data into industry reporting systems. So in essence, how do you integrate circular economy that at the end of the day, you can actually be able to report your performance, circular economy performance from a data point of view at the end of the sustainability reporting, I mean, at the end of the financial year, when you do your sustainability report, considering the data challenges that we've experienced in sustainability reporting generally. So again, I can take it again. The first question looks at the barriers in terms of the barriers in moving from linear to circularity as a business, and what ESG practices are available or practices you need to rely on in terms of addressing these barriers and these challenges. And then the second one looks at the data integration. How well do you integrate the circularity that you don't have a data challenge in terms of reporting actually what you've been able to achieve from a circular economy point of view at the end of the financial year, your sustainability report. I don't know if that's clear enough. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. So I just saw that someone raised their hand in case there was an additional point.
Yes, Dora, can you drop your message? Is that possible for you to type on the chat box? And again, moreover, we can actually take all the questions now. So you can engage Natalie later. We'll drop on the Circular Economy Innovation Partnership. She's dropped her contact. So you can engage if you need to. You can engage Natalie later if you need to have clarity on other things. And also you can also engage Fabian later. So those informations will be put on the chat box so that you can be able to engage later. So because we can't take all the questions at this session. Thank you. So Natalie, you can proceed.
To adopting circular business models, I mean, one is that although we are presenting it as like an opportunity for value creation, most businesses, especially like large businesses that we work with, they don't, it's expensive. Even if there's value to be created, there's a cost at least in trying to set up the systems to collect, to valorize waste, or or really to create the market that's needed. And I'll maybe just give an example of a fruit company who you know of that's using dry fruit snacks at an industrial scale. They are really excited about circular business models, and they have all this organic waste for which they're paying for to dispose of. But the investment that's needed to find an alternative that can create value, like to use that waste as energy, like a feedstock for energy, or to create other high value products, is actually, it costs a lot of R&D money that company doesn't have. So they have to look for other kinds of tools or partnerships that would allow that value to be created. So this is often the biggest barrier is either is trying to make that initial investment to create that product or create the new market. How do ESG practices help with this? I think it's really aligning, like it's the materiality issue again. So if you're able to use an ESG framework to show that it's important for the business to invest like that, this will help. It just helps focus the organizational energy into those targets. That would be my first recommendation. And then in terms of the reporting, I think we covered this already. Data is an issue. It's either that you start with areas where it's easy to collect, like it's actually possible to collect data. So if you're looking at generation of internal waste, it's in your control. You're able to train staff. The systems are relatively cheap. There's so much time to it's also a matter of
Yeah. So I think the third issue is I think our network is challenging. But again, we have dropped our contact on the chat group. I've also dropped the data of Fabian. So if you have more questions, if you need more engagements, please, you can contact them directly so that you can be able to get more from them on the B corporations and now what Natalia does in terms of the bringing aggregators, aggregators and investors together and helping innovators to be able to scale in the circular economy space, in the work she does. Yeah, so I think I think you agree with me, this has been a very fantastic session. I think we're about to round up. I think we need you to be able to fill in the evaluation sheet so that we can hear from you on this session how we need to improve, because your comments are always very important, your evaluation are always very important, and so it will be nice for you to have dropped on the chat box in terms of your feedback. I've dropped, so we need to hear your feedback. Very important so that we can improve as we go into the new year. This is I hope we can have an emergency session in December, because actually I would say as a moderator, this has also been a good learning one for me. Like what Natalia said in terms of scale of that, of the ESG practices and reporting, materiality is very important. So is the circular economy material to your business? That is where you start from. If it's material for your business, then you need to start documenting and collecting data so that you can be able to report and setting your KPIs and defining clear initiatives, setting KPIs and metrics so that you can report at the end of the day. So which is very, very important, because we're about in the next 2 years in Nigeria, in the next 3 years, by 2028, we're going to be having a mandatory reporting using the IFRS and disclosure standards. So for organizations, we should know that once something is material to you, you have no hiding place, you have to report on it, which is very, very important. But again, aside regulation, we need to also understand the strategic imperative of this, what it means as a business imperative. So what does it mean? What does the circular economy, don't just call the circular economy for fun. is an economy that is productive in terms of beneficial. So it fits into the sustainable finance conversation. So what are the benefit in terms of economic benefit to our businesses? What does it mean in creating new markets, new businesses, new products, new services? What does it mean in terms of how we define our loan system? What does it mean in terms of no waste? Nothing is lost in the value chain. Everything is accounted for and is of value. So this is, again, we speak to what Pedro said at the very beginning of this engagement. So we are rounding up, and like I said, please, we need your feedback. We want to get better, want to be better. We hope that we want next year to be better than this. And we have feedback will be very, very helpful as we improve on this. And also, I would enjoy you to also follow up with Study One Foundation, follow with them, follow the great work we are doing. They are doing, like them on the social media platforms, follow them on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. They're doing greatly in terms of spreading the ESG message and creating awareness and building capabilities and capacities, institutional wise and individual and organizational wise in ESG space. Follow them, and because what they are doing, this knowledge is not cheap. Is people pay for it. It's one of the best schools in the world. But again, they're offering this as a service to society and community. So again, thank you very much for participating. I don't know if Sheyi has something to say so far we close for the day. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you to the speakers. It was quite an insightful session. Thank you, Fabian, and thank you, Dr. Natalie. And to our honorable moderator, Godson from PwC, we say a very big thank you. And we hope to see you all next year, 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.